Welcome to the Diversity and Initiative virtual event. My name is Nicole Serrato. I work for the Children's Scholarship Fund. I am also an alumni of the scholarship. Today, I will be introducing some of our panelists that are here to talk about diversity and inclusion. And as well, we're going to have a Q&A portion at the end so you can answer any questions that you might have in regards to diversity and inclusion. So with that being said, I just want to explain a little bit about what is the CSF Alumni Network. So CSF gives scholarships to kids K through 8th grade. After 8th grade, you graduate, you then become an alumni of the program. And we created an alumni network to be able to provide resources to you and information that can help you on your continued educational journey and career in the future, which is what we're doing today. Second, the Young Leaders Board and the President Council are two groups that CSF has created. I'm going to introduce some of the members who are part of those here today. Essentially, the Young Leaders Board is a group of young professionals in New York City who are established in their careers and who are wanting to give back to you, wanting to share their experience, their information, their time, their resources, and they are dedicated to helping you further along in your journey as well. So the Young Leaders Board and the President Council, they're both here to help you. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. So first we have Rico Charity. He is a President Council's member and an associate of Paul Weiss. He is a graduate of Virginia Tech and Georgetown University Law Center. Next, we have Gus Thomas, is also part of the President Council. He is a graduate of Skidmore College and he works in development and alumni relations at New York University. And last, we have Michelle, who is a Young Leaders Board member who works for Geller & Company, and she studied at Binghamton University in upstate New York. It's a very impressive panel. A couple of the members have been on here before to speak with you. This is a completely different topic, so we're really excited to hear what they have to say. We're going to hear from each of this panelists. They're going to talk to us for about 4 to 5 minutes on their experience with diversity and inclusion in the workplace and also during their college experience. After each of them speak, then we're going to go ahead and they're going to go ahead and answer questions at the end. So while they're speaking, if you have any questions that come to mind, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. You can send questions in both anonymously, or you can send them in and come on screen and personally ask your questions. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hear from Michelle first. So Michelle, you can take over for here.
So when I think about diversity and inclusion, especially as it was in college, I just think about all of the diverse groups that I was actually affiliated with and all of the ways that I was actually able to interact with these groups. My university actually happened to have a lot of fraternities and sororities, a lot of which had cultural backgrounds. So we had, for instance, a very much Latina-X sorority group, or one that happened to be predominantly Jewish. And then I had friends in all of these organizations, and they've invited me to events. So I was able to attend Shabbat, for instance, and that was my first time actually being a part of more of a religious ceremony and learning more about that kind of cultural awareness. But that allows you to get more knowledge and more appreciation for where people are coming from, and also more understanding of what their background was. I think that having that information and also just being open-minded to it allows you to be coming from a place of selflessness and a place of approachability. It allows you to have more in common with the person next to you. But that just doesn't stop in college. That also transcends into the workplace. So for instance, even more recently, many of us could probably attest, we actually have not only training on diversity and inclusion, but it's something that most companies today are really holding strong to what they find impactful, to have that type of, it's not only just diversity in background, but in thought and experiences. So whether you identify diversity with ethnical background, or even maybe how you identify yourself for like LGBTQ and having that representation in the workforce, but it's because of that knowledge or that awareness that we have a diverse country, we have people from different backgrounds, and we need to be able to have a workplace that identifies with and appreciates that type of inclusion. Because at this point, anything less than that is not tolerated. But more recently, the nice thing is, for instance, we had a month for Asian awareness. So we heard what my, and this is really recent, what my Asian colleagues had to experience and what kind of fears they had recently, considering the climate that we're living in. And it gave us more awareness and it gave us an opportunity to be vulnerable and ask them, how can we be better allies with them? So diversity doesn't start at college. It doesn't start at the workforce. It actually starts right now where you guys are in your own seats at school. So how do you make sure that you manifest those strong values of diversity and inclusion on a daily basis? Always try to have that in the back of your mind.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was definitely a great start. Diversity starts here today. Look at the screen that we're on. Look at all the panelists. This is a very diverse panel. So that's exciting. So we're going to go ahead and hear from Thomas next.
Very happy to be here today and talk to you because it wasn't so long ago that I was in your seats. And I'm not going to lie, I was very scared. I was very nervous. I was the first person to go to college in my family. I went to a school called All Hallows, and ultimately it was a lot of fear of the unknown, not sure what to expect. No one that I had knew that was close to me that had kind of walked the road. So when I went to school, I'm from the South Bronx, and most people look like me at the time. And so going to a school like Skidmore College, where it was essentially a culture shock. And so it was, I had to think about things of how do I create new friends to how to socialize. Some of the people, when I first got to college, said, you speak a little differently. And so I had to really figure out how to find my footing and find my ground. And that's why today I really want to talk about how even no matter where you are, there's certain things that can ground you and could keep you comfortable and in your comfort zone. And so if you are currently in high school and you are participating in certain clubs, there's no doubt in my mind that those clubs are also going to exist at the college level. And so if you are nervous and you're thinking, where do I begin? That's a good place where you should start, where something that you're familiar with. So for me, I had participated in things like mock trial. I was, interested in political science. I like to talk, I like to debate. And so that was a good start for me to find people that I felt had similar values. And then I branched out from there. And so tying into what Michelle said with fraternities and sororities, that's awesome. I didn't necessarily have fraternities, sororities, but don't be scared if you don't have that in your college. You could also have clubs, you could also have activities. And so just kind of wanted to focus in on that. And if you hit a level of culture shock, there is going to be, clubs and activities. There are going to be people that, come from your environment, or even if they may not look like you, you're going to be more than surprised that you're going to find a lot of people who are exactly like you, above and beyond what's on the surface. And so just wanted to touch on that. And similar to the workplace, so I had a great opportunity to actually travel to Spain and live in Europe post college. Also going into the work environment in New York, how competitive it could be, how difficult it could be. And sometimes people can look at you and assume certain things based on how you look or cultural background. But the fact of the matter is having a certain confidence level in what you bring to the table, being able to enter into every dialogue with the things that you're good at, right? And the things, and having an open mind. And I'll kind of end with this. At the end of the day, when I looked at my family, my mom, my grandmother, they were very nervous, always sending me away. And I'm sure your parents are excited and anxious, and there's a bit of anxiety as well. But always know that you have a foundation, you have a home, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It may seem scary, but once you get there and once you have those first conversations and you're participating in those clubs and you're meeting people, little by little, you're going to start to find your stride. So I'm super excited to be here today. Like I said, I'm excited to hear your questions. And no matter what environment you're in, you're going to be able to find that comfort and excel at a high level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. There was so much knowledge and experience and valuable information in what you just said. So thank you so much for that. So next we're going to have Rico come on and give us a little bit of his experience with diversity and inclusion in college and in the workforce.
I'm actually very glad that I went after Thomas because he actually just checked one of the biases I had. Well, not a bias, just a pre a misconception I had. So I was gonna say that I grew up in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, and unlike people who may have grown up in New York, but he just told me about South Bronx. His experience coming up from the South Bronx and going to school, and our experience was so similar because where I'm from in Richmond, Virginia, everyone I grew up looked just like me. We were all very similar situated. And then like now living in New York, I see that it just seemed like a melting pot. So I assumed that people who grew up in New York didn't have that experience, but that was just a diversity of experience moment that I just had just now learning that. But I guess just jumping back to my story, just to tie it all in. So my story is very similar to Thomas. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. Everyone was similarly situated in my neighborhood. I go to college and it was just a complete culture shock. This is the first time I've experienced being the only one in the room, which is something that since college I've experienced. And when I say the only one in the room, I mean the only person of color in the room. And since college, I've experienced that countless times over and over again, but that was my first time ever experiencing that. And then also, oh, you speak differently. I spoke fluent slang. I didn't have a grasp on the English language, at least not as well as my peers. And so having that experience, then interacting with people who had just totally different upbringings from mine, people who were wealthy. I went to Virginia Tech, so we had some very wealthy people, and understanding how they live, and then comparing it against like how I grew up, and just how their experience was unfathomable to me. Mine was just equally I have no idea like how that people live that way was for them. So being able to engage with people and learn from their experiences, kind of talk about my experiences. That was college, law school, same situation. Just more and more. If I went to Georgetown for law school, so just more experiences, more people come together, and then coming to New York, this city that has a little bit of everybody, but then also still working in a space where I am very often still the only one in the room. It's definitely has me looking at diversity through a whole bunch of lenses. Like I just said, diversity of experience, diversity of culture, diversity of background, ethnic, gender as well. And it's just like seeing how everything comes together and trying to build this inclusive environment is something that has been very, very near and dear to my experience, has allowed me to learn, and I see all the learning going on around me. So I'm really I'm excited to talk about this subject, excited to be here. And yeah, really excited to hear your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rico, for that. And I just like to add in just to add on everything that Michelle and Thomas and Rico said is I had a very similar experience when I went to college as well. And so if you grow up in a specific neighborhood, you know, you have a lot of things in common with your friends and you know each other, you come from similar backgrounds, similar experiences, even if you're from different backgrounds because you grew up in the same neighborhood. And one tidbit that I want to add on is one thing that you don't realize when you go to college is that when you meet all of these people from diverse backgrounds, my initial reaction is I was intimidated. Like, oh my God, who are these people? You know, like they're so different from me. We probably have absolutely nothing in common. And that can be further from the truth. The reality is when you start talking to them, you realize you both have so much in common, very similar human experiences that have nothing to do with culture or have to do with status or anything of that sort. So I think it's really important to come into this panel or this webinar, into college, into the workplace with a very open mind that the people that you're working with, even if they look different, even if they have a different status, and you think you may not be able to relate to them, be open to it because you might have more in common than you think. So yeah, so I wanted to leave off with that and then head into the questions. So we did get our first question. I'm gonna ask one that's anonymous, and then we have a second question coming from one of the attendees, so we'll bring her on to ask that. So the first question is, how do you seek out and form friendships with people from other backgrounds when maybe it's easier to stay within your comfort zone? It's a good one. Who wants to take it? So I see some hands raised. Okay, so okay, great, Michelle. You can go ahead and take that.
Sure thing. So sorry. I think the first thing that it's hard, it's intimidating, and by all means, I don't think it's easy at first, but I think when I was in college, I made it a point that even when I wanted to say no, I just tried to say yes. And it's kind of having that attitude like, what's the worst that can happen? At least I'm going to go and put my best foot forward and try. And what I've realized is being in those situations and having a friend to tag along, or at least there's the two of you that I know somewhat, and then going forward towards trying to do something that might be uncomfortable alleviates the situation. So I would always ask a friend, would they be interested in joining this club with me? Because I want to try something out. And it's always comforting to know that someone else is there and you have someone to talk to. But then at the same time, you're like, okay, we're going to make a point to talk to two more people and try to like become friends with them and at least be open-minded to it. And even now at work, I find myself when there is an event after work and it requires time post work hours to actually stay a little bit longer to network, to literally expand your network, talk to people you might not normally talk to during the normal course of business. That takes time and effort. And sometimes it's intimidating. But at the end of the day, no one will say no if you want to smile at them, ask them how their day is going, or tell them like, hey, like, tell me a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do? Or like, how long have you been here for? Everyone has those like icebreaker conversations. So if you start doing that and more times you do it, you end up exercising that muscle. You'll realize that it's not too difficult, that maybe just like that idea of talking to someone who you might not be comfortable with becomes a little bit more comfortable to you. By no means is it second nature, but like anything, the more you practice, the better you get at it.
Yeah, definitely agree with all those points. Thomas?
Yeah, I think one of the things is just, and I love Michelle's point, is also just being curious and having an open mind and having fun and trying to see where you are currently. Because I'm one of those people that take a step back. I take a step back, I look at myself and I'm like, where are areas that you can grow? And a lot of the times I write those things down and I say, okay, next month, 2 months from now, I'm going to try to grow in these areas. And I'm going to try to find people who are good in these areas. The great thing about college is you're going to be close to a bunch of people that have expertise in a lot of different fields. And of course, you guys are studying and becoming better in it, but there's going to be a lot of people with innate ability in certain areas that you may not be strong in. So for example, when I was in college, patience wasn't something that was great for me. And so I would hang around a ton of people who just practice great patience. And so I just want to say this one quote because it's one of my favorite ones, and I think that it applies here. Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, as he exited jail, and he was imprisoned unjustly for 27 years, he said this. He said, as he walked towards the gates of freedom, had he not left his hatred and bitterness behind, he would still be imprisoned. And so there's certain things that we have to, and that's why I talk about perspective. We have to look at people who don't look like us or who don't act like us and not say, oh, they're not like us, we shouldn't engage. We should be curious of like, why are they like this? What can I learn from them? And once you kind of make that simple adjustment of, okay, I'm not necessarily good in this area, let me try to connect with someone who is good in that. Instead of just thinking about your own, like, I'm nervous, I'm scared. Once you start thinking about the other and thinking about how you can impact people, how can you change your family? How can you change your community? How can you change your college if you kind of rest your anxiety, rest your nerves, and just open the door to a conversation? Just say hello, just try it. So those are my 2 cents.
That's amazing. I love that quote. I actually have never heard that before. So write that one down, attendees. That's a good one. Rico, I saw your hand up and it came down. Are you still wanting to answer this question?
Yeah, sure, certainly. I can still add to it. I also didn't. I think Michelle and Thomas covered it so well that I was like, it's nothing more I can add. But one thing I guess I would add, or not even add, just emphasize on, is just being 100% genuine yourself. Like, as a person that is not like, well, historically, I have not been good at this. I have not been the person that's historically been good at stepping out of their comfort zone and just going to talk to a stranger, especially a stranger that didn't look like me. But I think when I got comfortable with just being 100% myself and allowing myself to be genuinely curious about other people, it allowed me to just go into a conversation comfortable with myself. I'm like, hey, so I heard you enjoy this. Can you tell me more about it? I never knew about that before. I've never heard of this. And that's a way of engaging in conversation, because a lot of time these people don't know how to speak to you either. And that's not like people that don't look like you. It's just people in general. I think everybody on this panel, everyone that's on this call right now has felt uncomfortable in a situation at some point in life where you've been in a room, you don't know if you know anybody, you want to talk to people, you don't know what to say. Sometimes you could be that person, just walk up and talk to somebody that's probably feeling the same as you, and ask them a question about themselves. Throw them an easy one, like, hey, I know you're interested in this, or tell me about this, or how did you find this? You can find, there's no shortage of conversation topics. And you help that person in a situation where they may be feeling uncomfortable. You help yourself and you make a friend.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. So before we move on to the next question, I do want to add that one little, I guess, not tip, but one little trick that I use when I walk into a room and I'm like, oh my God, there's so many people here I don't know. And I'm like, there's two people I do know. But even if there isn't, I'll go up to someone and be like, so I don't really know anybody here. What's your name? Like, I'll just call myself out. Like, I know nobody in this room. And I actually did that recently last week, and I was invited to something and I walked in and I was like, I literally know nobody here and I don't even know who to go up to. And so I just was standing next to them and I turned to them. I was like, you know anybody here? They're like, yeah, I do. Do you? I'm like, nope, no one. They're like, oh, let me help you with that. I'll introduce you to a couple people. I was like, great. Went around and started introducing me to people. So that's a great icebreaker, is just being transparent. Be like, I'm so nervous. I know nobody here. I have no clue what to do, where to stand, how to be. So sometimes that's really a really good icebreaker as well. So we're going to bring someone on screen to ask a question. She has been to several of our panels and we always love having her on. She is an alumni of the program as well. Isabella, I'm going to let you ask your question.
Sorry, I was just wanted to bring up my question. Oh, well, my question's gone. I can't find it. But my question was, have you ever experienced discrimination for either being like a person of color or a woman? And like, how have you dealt with that?
And just to emphasize on her question, I can still see it. It says in college or in the workplace, right? For being a woman or a person of color. And how did you deal with that? You can stay on screen if you want. Raise your hand, panelist. All right, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've experienced it a few times, but again, when I talk about perspective and how you see things, I genuinely see people as a lot of times not knowing any better and meaning well. That's how I always approach situations. And even if they meant bad, you just leave them where they are, right? But you just represent yourself. So I was working for a company at the time. I wasn't in fundraising. I was in sales at the time. And so we had an event in San Antonio, Texas. And so there was the president of the company. So there were many companies, and it was my job to kind of sell to each company that was there. And so it was the president and then like a secret investor. So the person who had like millions, who funded the company, was there. And so I sat with both of them. I managed to, originally they didn't want to sign a contract, and through networking and talking and just some of the sales that I learned, got them to up their contract threefold. And so the guy was very surprised by that. And he, like, in his mind, it was more like, how dare you? Like, where are you from? Like, so it was some of that stuff. And so later that night, right? So the contract got signed, everything is good. Later that night, there's like a casino themed event. And so I have about 8, 9 people surrounding me, and we're just having discussion, right? We're just having discussion. And of course, they all happen to be Caucasian. And this one guy comes up and he says, "How did you get here?" And as he says this, everybody starts to like move away, because the tone and like how he said it was very abrupt. People are drinking a little bit of alcohol now, so they move away, because I think political incorrectness, people just get nervous by. And he says, "How did you get here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "How does a kid, African American from the South Bronx, how do you get to the stage?" And so some people felt insulted and they moved away. And I was just curious, right? And so he said, "How did you get here?" So I answered his question. I said, I come from a good family and we value education. And I went to high school. I did well in high school. I went to college. And so I answered his question. And then I turned the question on him and I said, "How did you get here?" And then so from that conversation, he's actually a friend till this day, right? But had I not listened to people like Rico, Michelle, and what they're giving all of you, the gems that they're giving you, if I had just stayed in my community, I would have seen that completely differently. I would have came off very rude. I'd been like, "Who are you? Like, what do you, like, who are you to come and impose yourself in this conversation?" But that's one thing that I would say. And as I told people, people were like, "Wow, that really happened to you." And that doesn't happen to my counterparts, right? That are Caucasian, that look different. They're not outed because of how they look. But again, the takeaway from that is believe in yourself, right? Like Rico said, be genuine of who you are. And if you genuinely felt disrespected, just remove yourself. But I didn't. I was just curious, like, why would you ask me this? Like, what gives you what makes you think this is okay? And instead of being angry towards it, I just wanted to have a teachable moment for him where, I could tell him in a genuine way, like, that wasn't the best way of doing that. I know what you were trying to accomplish, but that wasn't the best way. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
Great. Okay, Rico.
I think the difficult part about this question is which time, because it's like there's so many instances that come through my mind, and some of them, oh wait, I still have my hand raised. Some of them I did notice in the moment and maybe caught on afterwards. Some of them were just completely blatant on their face, and then and then some were just based on, I guess, other people's just ignorance in a lot of ways. I guess I can give you a little bit about each category. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm the hero in the story, and every time I just jumped in and said, like, this shouldn't happen, because that's not a real thing. I didn't. A lot of cases, I didn't realize it until afterwards. But there's been situations where we're talking about, like, oh, well, something comes to mind. Like, we were in class first time, I think, and this may have just been my ignorance as a high school, middle school student, but I had never really understood what affirmative action was. But when I got to college, I was in the class, and the topic was like, what do you think about affirmative action? It was a question posed to the class. I'm the only Black student in class. Everybody's quiet. Then the professor's like, "Rico, what do you think about affirmative action?" I'm like, this wasn't part of assigned reading. It wasn't part of anything. It was like maybe the first, second day. I'm like, and I'm a freshman. I don't know what affirmative action is. Like, then it was like, so you think it benefits people? So you have stuff like that, or you have stuff when you walk into a store and someone, this is the more blatant thing, when you walk into a store and you didn't find what you want, so you just walk out the store, but then the store person comes out and says, "You stole something." I'm like, and we have you on camera, and you're wondering, how do you have me on camera when I didn't touch anything? Let's go roll the camera. But so you have those type of things. You have instances where, those are different stages. That was like college, and then at work, when there aren't that many Black lawyers, especially aren't that many Black male lawyers, and especially in the firm I work with, or in the type of firms that I work for, where you go downstairs to get your food at night, and people assume that you're the food delivery person. So like letting you back upstairs, like, yeah, where you going? Like the food delivery is it. I work here. Like that's my office upstairs. So you have those type of things. And so some of those situations, it's blatantness on his face, you address it in a moment. Some of the situations I just didn't realize it until afterwards. But I said, well, I can say all of those situations have led to me being a far better advocate for people now. So now if I see something, I say something, even if it's whether it's happening to me or not, I'm that person that will jump in. It's like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. This is why, blah, blah, blah. Or I also represent a ton of major companies. So when we're talking about stuff or the things they want to launch, I see some things in advance like, you shouldn't do that. Here's why. Nah, I don't like the way you said that. Here's why. And you're able to take, well, I was been able to take those experiences and translate it into my career. So now I can talk to my clients, I can talk to people, I can advocate on people's behalf about this is what you can, this is what you should do, this is what you can't do, this is what I suggest you not do because of XYZ.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Rico. I like to add in on that from the woman's perspective, because that's something that I feel like I've dealt with both in college and in the workplace. And so I think from like professors or other male students, like how I've dealt with any type of disrespect or kind of like anything that sense is just like of speaking up and expressing that I don't, setting a boundary, I think is how I've dealt with that. Unfortunately, it does happen. So it's like, if, you know, I had a teacher tell me after the first assignment, I think a week into class, that I should just drop the class because I was probably not going to pass. And I don't know if that had anything to do with me being a woman, maybe not, but it was a very highly assumptive thing to say, like, hey, I think you should drop this class because you're going to fail. It's like, what? Like, how do you know that after a week and one assignment? Like, there's no way. And I ended up passing his class with an A. And so I told him, I said, I really appreciate your feedback. I will not be dropping this class. And I said, let me know if there's anything I could do to make up the points for the first assignment. And he was like, oh, there's nothing you can do. There's no extra credit. And I found out later he had given other people extra credit. And I was like, hey, why was that not an option for me? I don't understand. Again, whether it has to do with me being a woman or not, me being a Latina or not, I have no idea. I say that when it comes to the workplace, in the past, the type of discrimination I received and how I dealt with it was when I did sales and finance, and which was dominated by men. You know, it's a dominated industry by men, and going through competitions and sales, and there is just kind of a blatant disrespect of like, oh, well, you're a woman, so you're probably not going to beat me in these sales numbers. And it wasn't like they were telling me this directly, but it was the way that the leads they would or would not give me, the opportunities they would or would not give me. And so what I did in my response to that was to just create opportunities for myself and work harder, set my boundaries and say, hey, I don't think it's okay, but you know, I got past it already, and this is a solution I found. Like, be solution focused. Because if you focus on the problem of I'm being discriminated against because I'm a woman, or I'm being discriminated because if you focus on the problem of that, let me focus on that problem, then, you know, it's going to be very difficult to find a solution. So I say just focus on what you can do in those scenarios and set your boundaries. But that's going to be the last for this question as well. This was a great question. I know we spent a lot of time on it. It's always nice seeing you. And then we're going to go to the next question. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have another question. So do I just like type it in the chat, or?
Yeah, type it in the chat. We'll bring you back. Okay, so we have a question that's coming from an anonymous person. It says, what does your company do to make sure that everyone feels included? So who wants to answer that? What does your company do to make sure that everyone feels included? Let's give them a second. Jeopardy. Okay. Sometimes that helps you think, right? Oh, Michelle, there we go. Go ahead.
My company focuses really much on like that idea of no tolerance for anything less than what's acceptable. So with that in mind, we have not only trainings to talk about how to have those difficult conversations where, to give you an example in a training, they'll say that someone happens to be pregnant and the manager comes up and says, oh, she's just moody because she's pregnant. And it's everyone else in the room's like, how can you say such a thing? Like, that's not acceptable. But it's being able to like see, for instance, those kind of like dialogues or how to handle those situations, which I think as someone like myself who happens to work in the workplace and then learns how to handle it and how, like, what are the best protocols towards escalating issues. Because sometimes we hear things where, you know, there are times where we're like, that really isn't appropriate, but you actually don't feel comfortable vocalizing it. So knowing who to talk to and who to escalate the problem to is always advisable. I mean, at least personally for me, I've had situations similar to what Nicole had prefaced where I felt isolated. Why? Because I'm also in finance, and more often than not, there are boys clubs, and they do a very good job at isolating girls or women, in fact, without realizing it, because they're just so enmeshed in each other's businesses. Where, similar to what Nicole mentioned, they had like a whiteboard and they would have like a roster of who's performing the best, very competitive, almost to the point that they almost feel like they can't include other individuals into it. But it's also those opportunities where you come up and say, hey, what is this? Can you tell me more about this? Like, can we have a discussion over it? But I find that it's sometimes you know, people are human, and sometimes people miss those opportunities to include because they're just not aware. But it's having that awareness in the foreground, which is why we have trainings about it. But having that, you know, open perceptiveness. If you're not going to include me, how can I put myself as part of the conversation? How can I make myself feel less excluded, and find a way to be a little bit more open-minded and like approachable towards, you know, this, you know, in a group. And I think it was Thomas who prefaced, if you are not exposed to situations like that, you might actually come back almost combatively. Like, I can't believe they're excluding me. How can this be? I don't even want to be, you know, affiliated with these people. Let me not be part of the resolution. Let me just ignore it and run away. But coming forward with it and saying like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, now tell me what is it you're doing? You're having them part of the conversation, which I think is always a way to just try to make things a little bit more, you know, friendly, to establish some level of camaraderie. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much. So Isabella has another question. So we'll go ahead and bring her back on. But Thomas, did you have anything to say about that before she comes?
I think Rico had his hand up. You wanted to say a few words, Rico?
Oh, Rico, I'm so sorry. You put it down.
Oh, no worries. We can jump to the next question. We can jump to
No, go ahead. So the question was, how does your company make sure everyone feels included? And then we'll go to Isabella's question.
I guess I could just make this super brief. I think just across the board, I think a lot of companies could do this better. But I think especially in larger companies, sometimes it's difficult to do because everybody's included when you're in a massive company. Is like a challenge. But I think one way that companies do this well, at least in my experience, is that they try to create spaces for people to come together. Like, for example, my firm has a large number of affinity groups where it seems like we just have endless budgets to do things with each other and like get to know each other and be that space for one another. And then I think I guess this is like something that the onus is put on us, and like even you all, as you go through college and you become professionals, like even though that space is created, making that space bigger. So, and advocating for that space to be bigger, and making sure that people at all levels understand what inclusiveness looks like, and pushing for things that you didn't have. So there was a ton of things that I didn't have when I was like starting out, but that I have found have been super helpful. And now we push to make sure the juniors could have that stuff, because there's training, there's like coaching, there's like just development that should have been happening for a long time, but I noticed there was a lack there. But people before me may have noticed that there was a lack of, and every successive generation tries to make it better for like the people who are coming under them. So I think that is something that has been happening, something that should continue to happen in order to make all these spaces more inclusive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you added that. Oh, there she is. She's back. Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if I said thank you last time, but thank you for answering my previous question. And then my question for this time, I don't know if I worded it correctly, but I'll still say it. It's more sort of like a point that Rico brought up earlier. And my question is it difficult still being yourself and genuine while still being professional in like college or the workplace?
Any takers? All right, Rico.
I don't think I went first on any questions, so I go first this time. Um, is it difficult? It is, but not. Yes and no. When I was, I guess, when I was more junior, I think I've become at least more senior. Where now it's like this is the me that you're just gonna get. And I could have been this way all along, but it was just a nervousness. And it's also going back to like I said when I entered college the first time, like my grasp of the English language is not the same as everybody else's. The way I speak and sometimes how I present words. Like I'm from the South, so sometimes some words are going to slip up that are going to be Southern, and that's just who I am. I think I so to say if it's harder or easier, sometimes I can like drift into the land of super informal. Clients seem to love it, but sometimes people say, oh, we could these are still clients, but I mean, so but then there's also time periods where I can't have it. I'm not formal. I'm not super formal anymore. I used to be, but that made work suck. Like works when I was trying to be this polished person that in a lot of ways just what I thought a lawyer should be just kind of made me miserable. So now when I'm in these meetings or I'm doing whatever, I try to be 100% me. I mean, still within the professional realm. Like you're not going to treat your clients and your peers the same way you might treat your friends outside of work, but at the same time, it's still bringing your authentic self in. It is a challenge, especially when you're new to a place. But after you've been there for a while, I think you get comfortable and you get comfortable in your skills and abilities. People around you get comfortable in your skills and abilities. You know your value. You know the value you bring, and yeah, it just kind of just happens naturally. I guess one more point and I stop. It's this thing that I know a lot of my peers do, like at least used to do. It's like this voice that people have when you answer the call, this high, peppy, I'm excited about everything type of voice. I slowly found that like disappearing from me. So it's not real. And if I'm gonna be doing this thing all day long, the thing that's gonna make it more draining is if I'm pretending to be somebody else. So now, and doing that, I've also realized that it's allowed the people that I speak to be their authentic self. So now I have really great relationships with a ton of people because we have humanized our interactions. I have tons of great relationships with our clients, tons of great relationships with my peers, tons of great relationships with the partners that I work for, because it's a human interaction now. And it's not that just, okay, we're all going to pretend to be these people, and then we're going to go back to our office exhausted.
100%. That was covered very well. Does anybody else have anything to say about that? Michelle, Thomas? Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Rico's statements and that when you're looking to like achieve excellence and you're looking to be great at what you do, you're gonna find like when you see Rico and you see Michelle, like I would imagine they weren't like this. They didn't present themselves like this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It takes a little bit of time, but once you achieve excellence and you're in your career and you're doing really well, what sets you apart is your ability to be yourself. Because when you're in the business of relationships, people can tell, even if it's not like, people can tell like, okay, this person's putting on a certain voice or they're just saying this to be on my good side. But when you're who you are, it comes through. And I think another thing that Rico mentioned is like just the security aspect. So a lot of the times, I'll speak for myself as a person of color. When I enter a new environment, I want to look around to see how people talk, how they navigate, what the politics are, right? So I may be like a naturally like, hey, what's up? How we doing? I may be a person that's generally like that, but when I first walk in the door, I'm not doing all that stuff. I'm trying to see, like, is that how people normally, talk? Because I know if I come across, like, I'm like, oh, here's this guy, so yes, you have to be, it takes time, I would say. Earlier in your career, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to have that confidence to be day one, I'm going to be exactly, who I am. But the other thing I wanted to say is when you're at work versus when you're out of work, it's okay for those to be a little different. Like when you're out of work, if somebody like bumps you on the train or disrespects you, you don't have to have the same exact reaction to when you're in work, right? I think sometimes people think that you have to be 100% the same exact person or you're selling out or you're being different. No, it doesn't, because when you're at work, you have a goal. And the goal is to do your job well enough so you could get promoted or you could start your own company. And so you're on a different type of time. You're on a different type of mental, you don't have the, you're fulfilling your company's mission. So I just wanted to kind of say that, because it's okay to you could still be authentic and not be who you are outside of work. I just wanted to make sure that made sense, Isabella. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabella, for coming on and asking questions. We appreciate it. All right, so let's see if there's any more questions in the chat. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we do have another question that's coming in anonymously. Did you ever gravitate towards going to school or working in an office where people look like you? If so, can that keep you from growing? What are the benefits of getting to know people from outside your own background? It's a great question. Any takers? I think they're thinking right now. They're pondering their answers. This is what's happening in this moment. Thomas.
I'm just going to go real quick and let Michelle and Rico hop in. So in my profession, for example, fundraising, I'll just give a quick tidbit. My profession is 1% Black males, African-American males, Black, and 1% Black males. So if I stayed just in the environment of Black males, I personally wouldn't be able to grow, because it's unfortunate, but all of the people in leadership around the country that deals with development or fundraising, they don't look like me, right? So there's like a natural need, like I need to kind of branch out because of, the state of affairs in the country, to network and meet other people. I think there is a power. I have worked in organizations that were predominantly Black and Hispanic. I'm Afro-Latino. And yeah, it's been phenomenal. It's been amazing. But I always think there's value in branching out and meeting different people. Again, back to my original point, when you're curious and when you want to learn and you have certain goals of how you want to learn, just meeting anyone who's good in it. And LinkedIn, I don't work for LinkedIn, but a LinkedIn plug is, there's a benefit of looking different, of being different. It's a special power. And if you haven't heard that, I'm going to say that. It can get you meetings with people that probably wouldn't necessarily take your meeting, just because you may seem different to them, just because you may look different. And it's a thought process of, wow, my industry doesn't reflect the individual that's reaching out to me. How dare this person be curious enough to reach out to me? Let me take their call. So there's a curiosity on both sides. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Michelle, Rico, do you have anything to add to that? All right, Rico.
So just to echo what Thomas has said about this, it is critical to be able to like make those connections, especially like, and it sounds like all of our professions kind of cross this way, especially in our professions. Like there aren't a tremendous amount of people that look like me that are within this realm that we call big law. That's just not. But I will also say that even if there were, some of the biggest champions for me, some of the people who really want me on things, have put me in front of like massive like clients and like have let me just run with things and help me grow my career, were people who look nothing like me. The people who kind of gave me different shots, the people who sat down for hours regularly every week to make sure I understood how to be an attorney and how every aspect of this thing works. Didn't look like me. But it's also just, I guess that also I think that ties back to what we were just talking about, like being human and being yourself, and being able to ask for that help, or being able to, when someone comes and tries to offer the help to you, being able to be yourself with it and humanize yourself. It allows them to be human and tell you all the stuff that, like, okay, I'm not good in this either, or like this has been an insecurity, this is an area of insecurity to me when I was in your position, or this is something I want. They see you as a human and they want to help you. And even last year, there were people who tons of time, actually, even this year too. There's people who have millions of other things that they can be doing, but because we were able to form a relationship, none of these people look like me. They take time out of their day very, very often to say, okay, Rico, this is kind of how I see the world moving in this way, and I think you being in this position could help XYZ. And people will really want you to advance. So that's something I learned really, really early in my career, was that you want people to be your mentors for sure, but you also want that thing called sponsorship, where you want people to advocate for you even when you're not in the room. And I found that in my career, a lot of those people have been people who don't look like me at all. Of course, not to say the people who look like me haven't, because they've also been advocating, but you can never have too many people saying good things about you when you're not in the room. So so definitely those relationships are crucial to your development, especially in this country where a lot of the people at the top may not look like you.
100%. So we're going to actually move on to the last question, Michelle, just because for time purposes. But this last question, all of us are going to answer. So this is kind of the question that we're going to wrap up with, and I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. So I'll read the question. I'll kick off with my personal answer, and then we'll start from Michelle, and then go on to the two gentlemen here. So the next question is, if you could share one piece of advice with our alumni, what would, from what you've learned, what would it be? And so I'm going to regurgitate something I said in the beginning, which is keep an open mind and know that regardless of background, regardless of different ethnicity, regardless of status, you have something in common with someone else. And it's that you're both living a human experience. You both have had a heartbreak. You both, maybe not have dealt with death, or loss in one way or another. And so just come to the, approach getting to know someone from a different background with the perspective that they're human just like you, and they have experiences just like you. They have food that they don't like, they have food that they like, music. There's just so many things that can connect us. And so I think instead of feeling intimidated by someone or intimidated to speak to someone from a different culture, approach it with what can I potentially have in common with this person, and find and looking for that common ground. You typically find what you're looking for. So if you come and approach someone looking for the differences, you will find the differences. If you come and approach someone looking for the common ground, you will find the common ground. And so that's one piece of advice that I would give, that I've learned over the years, and it's really given me perspective, especially after you get to know people. And I have a very diverse group of friends, and when I get them together, it's like it's a huge melting pot, my parties, and it's great. And it's like, wow, it just really humbles you. So I would say that's the one piece of advice and thing that I've learned overall through college and through the workplace. So Michelle, what's the one piece of advice that you would share with the alumni that you've learned? What would that be?
Sure. Honestly, just try to be open-minded and be vulnerable. I think telling people where you're coming from, and sometimes it's hard to make that first move, especially when other people don't want to open up, but it's okay if you're the one doing it. I think just to echo all of the stories that others had shared regarding their experience in the workplace. I mean, I remember as a summer intern in like a giant bulge bracket bank, I was a kid from a state university and I'm Middle Eastern. So even when people look at me on the surface, they're like, oh, you're white. And I'm like, no, 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 culturally very different from someone who's dubbed white. Like my background is very different. My upbringing was very different. So just educating people where you're coming from and maybe what resources like you might have or not have, and just having other people, I think to what Rico said, having a sponsor, having an advocate, having people talk to you. Just being open-minded to sharing what is it that you're coming from, what you can bring to the table, that perspective that from your background that makes you unique, and like be proud of it. Like your background is what makes you special, so don't underplay it. Always know that is something that's special in you that you could showcase to others, and if you value it, they will learn to value it as well. So be strong, be vulnerable, and have fun.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you so much, Michelle. All right, Thomas, if you could share one piece of advice with our alumni on what you've learned, what would it be?
The one piece of advice I've learned is just believing in the power of relationships, of people, and just being kind. And I know that if my 16, 17-year-old self heard this, I'd probably be like, oh God, this guy, Mr. Positive over here. But in a real way, I've been able to meet people from all walks of life, either super rich, super affluent, to like the most humblest person, and still treated them the same and still spoke to them the same. And people, the amount of relationships that you have, and that people that care for you, that look out for you, and vice versa, it just makes everything a lot more fun, and it allows you to open doors that you never thought that you could open. And you'll know people from all around the world that you never thought you would know, but because you were genuine in building that relationship and caring for it, not just, oh, I want to know this person because they're this and they can do this for me. No, leave that at the door. Really genuinely caring about people and being curious. Where do they come from? Not necessarily thinking about ourselves, like, oh my God, this person could hurt me, or this person looks different from me, but just saying, this is a person above and beyond. This is a person. They have a story. What's their story, and how, as Nicole has hit on, how does it relate to mine, and what can we teach each other? So that would be my piece of advice. Be really interested and curious in people, despite how they look. Have fun and take leaps, because the more people you know, the more fun things are going to be. Trust me, you're going to be traveling around. It's going to be amazing. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Okay, so Rico, this is your last one to answer this question, and then we're going to wrap up. I'm just going to repeat it just for reference. If you could share one piece of advice with our alumni about what you learned, what would that be?
It would have to be confident, and that it's okay to be wrong. And I say that because I don't know if any of you grew up like I did, but I kind of grew up with this idea of being loud and wrong with something that was just like frowned upon. Like, if you're going to speak up, be right. But what I'm saying is that that's not, and at least in the professional world, like, it's a lot. The most confident person on their phone sometimes is just completely wrong. They're just loud and they're just wrong. And you're in a place where you can speak up and say, well, yeah, you don't make them look ridiculous. It's like, yeah, maybe in one case, but I think this way. But that's beside the point. The thing is just be confident. And like, it's okay to be wrong, but also like, don't doubt yourself, because if you have a feeling about something, you may be right, and your voice needs to be heard. So speak up on the call, speak up on the video chat, speak up in class, speak up, because one, you need to know, people need to know that you're there. People need to know that you're present. And you need to just be confident in your abilities, because you're not, wherever you are, you're not at that place by mistake. You are 100% qualified to be there. And you're 100% qualified to speak. So use your voice and speak, because that is going to be crucial to you at every level of your development, is that confidence, because you're already smart enough to be in whatever room you're in. So now it's just using that confidence and using your voice to articulate what you know, because you wouldn't be in that room if you couldn't add value. So just don't doubt that.
Thank you so much, Rico. That was great. So just to summarize, we have Michelle. She said, go ahead and just be transparent, be open. Thomas says, believe in the power of relationships. And Rico said, don't be afraid to be wrong. And go ahead and jump in when it comes to criticizing and brainstorming with your colleagues. I forgot what I said, but most important, does anybody remember what I said? I think I said, find common ground, find the common ground with people. There you go. Thank you so much. The panelists, you all did amazing. The information you gave was so invaluable. I'm sure our attendees feel the same way. We are going to take a screenshot. Before we do that, I just want to explain, if you're listening to this Q&A and you still have some follow-up questions for any of the panelists, you can go ahead and reach out to me and Nicole or N. Serrato at scholarshipfund.org with any questions. If you have a specific question for Rico or Michelle or Thomas, whether it be about diversity and inclusion or maybe about where they work at NYU or Paul Weiss or Geller and Company. If you have a specific question about them, go ahead and reach out to me. We do have an upcoming Zoom event in 2 weeks, which is going to be really amazing. It's June 29th, Tuesday. It's on resumes, how to build a resume, interview tips, and internships. So that's going to be a really, really great one. So make sure you mark your calendars and don't forget to attend that. Lastly, you see these handles up here. This is the social media for CSF, which I manage. So if you can go ahead and follow our Instagram, our Twitter, our Facebook. I don't know if Thomas, Rico, or Michelle, if you're following us on our social medias, but if you're not, this is your opportunity to do so. And if you are, you should comment on the post today so I know you are on there. And don't make me look you up. But that's for our attendees as well. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and take a screenshot, one for the road on 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Thank you so much, Rico, Michelle, Thomas. You all are wonderful.